I think by now we all realize that what we've lived through with this pandemic is probably the kind of largest change in our lives, the biggest event in our lives. If you think about the depth and the breadth of what we have gone through, it's 2 years, large elements of your life changed in a very profound way. Fears of illness, shutdown of the economy, changes in behavior, the very fact that we're doing this on Zoom itself. And it highlights just how resilient and how kind of resourceful people are. I mean, just look at the way this technology has performed and grown. And most of us don't realize that in order for us to be able to do what we're doing, there had to be a mad scramble to buy cloud space, to create more bandwidth, to create, to buy more computer chips, to make this infrastructure work when everyone was going to use it 25 times as much as they were using it. But that's all happened seamlessly. What we're not good at is dealing with figuring out how these kind of crises happen. So if you think about it, we've had three big shocks to the system since the end of the Cold War. 9/11, the global financial crisis, and now the pandemic. And what's striking about all three of them is they all start very small. They start with something that seems trivial and therefore very easy to miss. Right? 9/11 starts with 19 people, civilians, who board planes with box cutters. And that morphs into a global war on terror, the invasion of two countries, Iraq and Afghanistan, the creation of a whole new department of government, the Department of Homeland Security, and trillions of dollars spent in the pursuit of this war. If you think about the global financial crisis, it starts with something called credit default swaps, which most people before the crisis didn't even know existed. But it turns out that those credit default swaps were so large and so leveraged that when they started to collapse, they brought the entire global financial system down with them. If you look at the pandemic, at some level, it's the smallest. It is, this whole thing starts with a viral speck that is 1/10,000th the size of the dot at the end of a period on a sentence. That viral speck was in a bat somewhere in Wuhan, China. And now we have this, as a consequence, this global pandemic that has caused the largest shutdown of the global economy really ever. So when you think about it in these terms, the question becomes, what did we learn about this crisis, about the American system of resilience and crisis management? We learned something that is not very encouraging. Despite spending the most money in the world on healthcare, $3.5 trillion, 18 to 19% of American GDP, we have the worst outcomes for this crisis in the rich world. There may be one or two countries, small countries, that are worse, but I actually don't think so at this point. We have per capita the worst number of deaths, the worst number of infections, and at this point, one of the lowest vaccination rates. Almost all of Europe has higher vaccination rates than the United States right now. We're stuck under 70, they're mostly over 80%. Why is this? Well, the first thing that you realize is that wealth does not buy health. We do have an enormous number of resources that could be deployed, but public health is not the same as private health. So to put it in very simple terms, when you look at a pandemic, the crucial question is, are you able to snuff out the pandemic? And that means being able to get to everyone fast, whether it's for testing, for tracing, for vaccination. And we don't have very good systems to do that. For one thing, we have a highly federal system. It's not even just a federal system. We have a system where something like 2,500 different localities have public health functions and authorities that have to be corralled. We have this crazy quilt patchwork of center, state, local. I don't know what it's like exactly, around Nashville, but in New York, I can tell you, you go outside New York City into Westchester, and there's little towns in Westchester, little suburban towns of a few thousand people. Each one has its own public health system. Each one has its own fire department. Each one has its own police chief. This is massively redundant and wasteful, but more importantly, from a public health point of view, it means it's very difficult to get everybody on the same page at the same time, use the same data, share it, have one simple database that makes things happen. That feature of the American system turns out to be very problematic when you're dealing with public health. And so one of the lessons I hope is going to be that we have to find ways to create interoperability among these various systems and rationalize them somewhat. The good news here is that we are seeing an extraordinary confluence of information technology, biotechnology, moving us forward at a pace that we've never seen. And that in the pandemic, in a sense, powerfully accelerated these forces. It powerfully accelerated information technology because we had to live and work in a digital space in a way that we've never had to do. So the system was stress tested in a way that nothing could ever achieve that. But it also accelerated all these biotechnologies because all of a sudden you had to find solutions, you had to find cures, you had to find vaccines, and you had to find them fast. And again, we were forced to go through this process faster than we would ever have done before. So those pieces here are part of the extraordinary upside that we are going to live with. We are facing a new world coming out of this pandemic. And I think it's important that we recognize that. So much has changed because of these forces of acceleration. So one thing that I think we are seeing is a renewed ability for government to imagine itself acting in very large, broad ways. And this is bipartisan. Whether it was Trump or Biden, both realized that in circumstances like these, the government is going to have to step in and step in big. And it was able to spend money on a scale that governments have never done before. And there are pluses and minuses to it, but all I'm saying is, we're in new frontiers with regard to that. We're in new frontiers with the adoption of digital life. We're all navigating this new digital space. We're in new frontiers in terms of the organization of the workplace. We are not going to go back to a 24/7 workspace that looked exactly as it did in the past. It will be some hybrid model that we will all, through trial and error, become comfortable with. But my prediction is that fundamentally what is changing is we are no longer looking at the office as a place where we work. We are looking at it as a place where we work together, so that when we are doing work that can be done alone, or an occasional meeting, one-on-one, 1-on-5, those can be done anywhere. The office becomes the special space where you have group meetings, group think, strategic conferences, meeting with clients, bringing together of large groups of people, morale building exercises, integration of new members of the team. All those functions become what the office is about. And so the office will have to be planned differently. In a sense, WeWork, the company, has failed, but WeWork, the model, might well succeed. Manufacturing as a percentage of employment in the United States has been going down for 75 years. Do you know what other country it is now going down in? China. As you move up the scale, and as you move from manufacturing economies to software economies and services economies, you lose manufacturing jobs. Trying to protect every last manufacturing job. And by the way, only 16% of non-college educated people in America work in manufacturing. Something like 2% of all workers in America work in manufacturing. We are a service economy. 75% of our economy, of our workers, work in the service sector. So that's, for one thing, that's the way to think about this. We have to think about how do we do this strategically. Secondly, we've got to find a way to recognize that China is not going anywhere. It's the second largest economy in the world. It is going to be a factor in our lives no matter what we do. And we're going to buy and sell with them. And that's what makes this competition very different from that with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War traded in their peak year $2 billion that year. We trade with China $2 billion every day. So it is a whole different ballgame. And we have to find some way. I feel like we don't have the right word for it, but it's like some amalgam of competition and cooperation where we have to find a way. And finally, we have to find a way to deal with the Taiwan issue, which is what the question was about. There's no question that there is a strong geopolitical element to this competition, and we're going to have to find a way to deter China from trying to take over Taiwan. I would argue that the probably the most important thing to do there is to have a two-pronged strategy, one of which is military deterrence, where we help Taiwan build up its defenses. We make clear that we are serious about all this. But at the same time, what you want to do is enmesh China more and more in the economic system of the world so that the cost of invading Taiwan and breaking all those links becomes very high. Somebody said to me, a great China expert said, don't worry, nothing is going to happen till the end of the Olympics, because the Chinese will certainly not want to do anything that would endanger the 2022 Olympics. So I said, well, here's an idea. Why don't we, in a metaphorical sense, hold an Olympics in China every year so that they see the cost of decoupling from the world. And I mean that in a metaphorical sense. Maintain enough ties, economic, cultural, social, to China that delinking is very, very expensive for them, so that they would recognize that sanctions from the West would. We never seem to realize when you sanction a country like North Korea, it has no effect because North Korea has no ties with the world. When you sanction a country like Venezuela, it has no effect. It has no ties with the world. The pain of sanctions are felt by countries that are deeply intertwined in the world economy. And so that would be my approach to China. Find a way to enmesh it in the world and at the same time have very robust military deterrence, so they know, by the way, there would be a military cost, not just an economic cost, to trying to do something like take over Taiwan. We're playing with fire because these divisions, once they become deep, and it's very hard to get, it's very hard to reknit. It's very easy to destroy. It's very hard to reknit the fabric. And I just hope we find more people who are willing, on both the left and the right, to talk to each other, to try to find places to work together. Because otherwise, this is our great weakness. I mean, if you look at the United States, we're doing fantastically. We're leading the world in technology in every area. We are demographically vibrant. All other rich countries, the top 5 economies in the world, including China, of course, are demographically declining. We are demographically rising because of immigration. We're the only of the major advanced economies in the world that is also demographically strong and vibrant. We have this extraordinary ability to be kind of central player in the world because we are far away, really. So nobody worries that we're going to try and dominate them. So, we are a Pacific power, we are an Atlantic power, we have this extraordinary relationship in Latin America. Our big problem, our Achilles heel, is our politics.